Hey everyone, Future here and welcome to the attic. And today we're doing a sponsored video. Fun! I recently was contacted by Peter from Dawesome to check out Zyclope, and while we had a small conversation he also insisted that if there were any plugins I wanted to try, I should just name them and he would arrange a license for those plugins, which is very, very generous. And yeah, so my brain went, ooh, you got to try Cult, because that's a very interesting little thing. And while scrolling through their page, my eye also fell on something that is very, very different. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about Abyss, like the title suggests, of course. It's not really, it's hard to do these things and actually make it a surprise, because if you don't put a name in the title, people won't find it. So yeah, it's already spoiled. We're talking about Abyss. Yay. Anyways, the reason why Abyss is so different is because it's a very, I think he calls it a visual synthesizer, but not in the sense that you synthesize images, but that the controls are very visible and not so much exact and calculated. And I think that's very interesting. It's also very much against the way I am basically wired. I'm very much wired to be the control freak and have all the controls there and have very precise means of interacting with a synthesizer. So usually my workflow is go through the presets, find something that is pretty close, and then just dive in, find the exact parameters and tweak it to where I want it to be. That's sort of the general thing with me. And that's exactly what Abyss doesn't really allow. It's a synthesizer with a lot of indirect controls where you basically have some sliders and things, but you can't go in there and meticulously tweak things. And that's a very different flow, which is very much against the way I tend to work, which makes it very interesting. So in this video we will be going over what it is, what it does, and I'll leave some closing thoughts with how I, as a control freaky guy, experienced this synthesizer by Dawesome Abyss. If you're not into talky things, I will upload a 10-ish minute demo video without talking, where we will just slide and tweak and stuff so you can hear it. But if you're interested in actually seeing it and getting to know the controls, join me in the DAW and I'll see you on the other side. And welcome to the Abyss. Bit dark, maybe. Anyways, so this is Abyss by Dawesome, and like I said in the intro, it's a little bit of a different take on synthesizer, so we're going to have to be a little bit creative with going over the controls here. And I want to specifically start with the kind of direct controls, which are more like more mainstream synthesizers. So for this we're just going to, initialize, I guess. There we go. And we're going to start here at the top with a ADSR. And the first thing you might notice is that there's a lack of numbers, and that's because in Abyss we don't work with numbers, we just work on vibes. So, quick attack is quick. Slow attack is indeed very slow. Same goes for the release. I think it's pretty safe to say that's plenty of release for most people. This whole approach of not having numbers is a little bit weird if you're coming from the more standard synthesis side of things. At the same time, I think it's not really a big issue, because in general it's anyways things you dial in by kind of hearing it, and the numbers there are not all that interesting. So let's keep it around here. That's one of the direct control parameters we have. A few more direct control parameters we have are in the center here. We have, of course, a master pitch. In semitones, tune. We have a filter with resonance. Again, no numbers here or anything. It's very much a go by vibes. A dirt parameter. A bit of a bit crushy distortion vibe. Level. Panning. And an EQ bias. Brighter and darker. And that's sort of the kind of more standard direct controls. We have a few more in the effects section, but we're going to move there later on. Now, the sort of main thing with Abyss is this colored strip here in the middle. Now, this is kind of the oscillator, although oscillator isn't quite the right word. It's probably more like a preset selector. And you can change these by just clicking the edit. And if you click one of the dots, you will hear the sound at that point. And if you want to change the sound, you can select any sound here. And this is a little bit like the Excellent Audio Galaxy vibe. Let's take that one maybe. That's fine. And we can just plunk it in there. So now our sound sounds a little bit like this. Now, when you play something, you will see that little black line, and that denotes the sound that's being played, because you can select multiple of these kind of preset-y sounds. You can then blend between them. And this is done with the position sliders. It's a little bit like a wavetable in that sense. You can move between these presets. Now, the one thing I noticed here is that this feels very much like a kind of fade situation. So it's kind of like you have these different presets and you have a level fade between them. It's not quite like Sugar Bytes Factory, where you make several versions of a preset and then blend the parameters between them. It's very much more you have two presets running at the same time, and then you fade between the mix of those two. So it's a little bit less complicated in the way the sound evolves. Of course, we can automate this parameter, and we can get a little bit of a vibe of what it sounds like when it's moving. So let's take this poly, for instance, and we can assign it to this parameter. Now, to assign things, you simply need to select the parameter, and then you can use this little slidey thing to do positive or negative assignments. Let's do a positive assignment. Let's slam this all the way to the left. So now our position is all the way to the left, and we'll move from left to right, or well, it should. But first we're going to slow it way down. Bit of an arbitrary number here. You can also sync it, which makes it a little bit easier to understand.
So let's do 4 bars. And it's inverted. So 1/4. I can actually lower this. Okay, it's bipolar, so I need to keep it in the middle. Now the interesting thing is that this is a per voice thing. So when I play several voices, you can get them at different places in a position. Which is pretty interesting. It allows you to quite quickly get a big evolving sound going without having to put in too much thinking. And I think that's sort of the vibe this synthesizer is going for. It's very much oriented towards doing things without being too stressed about parameters and values and that sort of stuff. It's very much a just going with it, experimenting, trying things, seeing where things go. Aside from these parameters, you also have a FM control. So for now, I'm just going to uncouple this parameter. So let's do the FM. Now, personally, FM is a little bit of a tricky subject, and it's kind of hard to work with, even with parameters. So I find it a little bit hard to get super useful results out of this. But then again, FM synthesis isn't quite my strong suit, so that might very well be a user issue right there. Regardless, it's there. It's definitely worth experimenting with, and I'm pretty sure that if you start to do slower modulation of these parameters, you can get some interesting movements out of the sounds. As for the sounds, quite a field of options. You can just drag them in at any point and create interesting fades between them. Now, if you want more points, you can just add a few points. It will always kind of choose the shortest route between points. If you take two from an opposite of the spectrum, it will wrap around. It won't generate rainbows, but you can of course generate rainbows if you want to. So let's quickly check this setup. It's quite lovely. Now in the sound selection itself, you also have a bunch of settings, and these settings are to shape these kind of preset-y things into things that might better suit what you're looking for. For the sake of keeping things somewhat easily oriented, we'll just pick this sound here, and let's play around with the straighten, which if pushed to the right should make the sound more static, so less evolving. Maybe this sounds already a little bit too static. That's an interesting candidate. Double click deletes a little dot. There we go. So let's straighten. We can also change the detail. When pushed to the left, things should become softer and thinner. We also have noise to add noise. And organic to make things more or less moving with a sort of chorus effect. And between these values you can play around, of course. Very ethereal sounding. Sadly, these parameters can't be automated once you have it selected. That could have added another layer of complexity. At the same time, I think complexity in that sense is not really what this synthesizer is about. So I can respect that decision. Beside these functionalities, like I stated before, you have a few extra modulators here, an extra ADSR, extra LFOs. And these LFOs can be synced. They can be either poly or monophonic, and they can be bi or unipolar. You can select the rate, the quantization, and the level. And the way these work is that you can just draw in here to create shapes. You can also check some of the pre-made shapes, because making exact shapes is tricky at best. But again, also not entirely the point of this synthesizer. So it kind of makes sense that this is a little bit of a wild card thing as well. On the other side, you have a bunch of MIDI things you can tie, key tracking, sample and hold, and some MPE control stuff as well. If that's your vibe, you can assign it to any of the parameters. If you want to change the default key tracking, you can do that on this little piano thing here. And you can create some interesting shapes for if you want timbres to change with the position of your keypad or anything. That's totally doable. Double click on any of these will reset it. So it's kind of convenient when you mess it up. You can always find your way back. And last but not least, in the parameters, we have the effects. And we have a shimmer, reverb, a delay, a normal reverb, and a phaser. Now these all have two control parameters, which are pretty standard. So your depth, your shimmeriness, your delay time, and your feedback. You have a reverb size and a reverb width. You have a rate and a feedback for your phaser. The long bars control the mix. So more octopus is more shimmer. And that's basically that. You have several different modes, and every mode has a different kind of sound. Let's do, for instance, octopus. The nice thing is you can change these modes, and as you can hear, it's actually quite smooth in the transition between modes. As I alluded to in my intro, the main thing that drew me to Abyss is the very different kind of workflow, and it really forces you to work in a different way than is usual. It's less calculated, it's less precise, it's less planned, and it's really one of those things that's all about just doing stuff and seeing what happens. Now, this is inherently not what I'm used to working with. I'm very much a person that wants to be in control. I want to be able to find the parameter, change the parameter, and get just exactly what I want to. And that's just the way my brain is wired with these things. When I see a synthesizer and I play a sound, I go, oh, I need to change this parameter, dive in, find the exact parameter, change it 0.2%, and it will be what I want to be. Kind of that vibe. And what Abyss does is really take that out of your hands. You no longer have that control. And this is both a blessing and a curse, because it also means that you can't just go in there and instantly fix what you want to change when a sound isn't working for you, which can be a real big downside. A lot of things you can overcome by using external EQs or filters and cutting things out of stuff. So there's definitely ways around it. But as a synthesizer, it's just less about being in control and more about kind of enjoying the ride, I guess. It's a little bit of one of those hippie things to say, but well, it's what it boils down to. I think in that sense, it's a very compelling product. Not necessarily made for me, but again, that's the exact reason why I wanted to try this. Because if you always use the same things, you also get used to those things, and you kind of lose that challenge that you can give yourself by trying different things. And in that sense, I found my time with Abyss very pleasant, and I'm fairly sure it will find its way into some projects, because once you start to experiment with it, especially on an ambient level, kind of the ambient scene, and I think that's what this is aimed to as well, there's a lot of sounds here. Like, well, for instance, this just random thing I just made. That will work perfectly fine behind some nature footage. You can just plingle some notes, and the reverb and the delays and the stuff just fills in the void, and it will work beautifully. And a lot of these presets really strongly capitalize on that sort of thing, where you can just dunk in some notes, and you can instantly make a soundtrack for anything that's vibey, naturey, ambienty, which is excellent. I'm not going to say anything bad about it. It's just when you want to be in control, yeah, that's simply where you're going to lose. So definitely not a control freaks tool, but a very interesting tool regardless. Now, the tricky thing with synths very much like this is that the only way to find out if it's something that you're going to enjoy is to get hands-on with it. Now, you can, through Traction, get a free trial and use stuff for as far as I could find, so that's a good way, although I would highly recommend, if you're going to do that, to line up several synthesizers so you can maximize that free trial period. But that's really the best advice I can give you. If you are looking for kind of an ambient machine and you're totally okay with not being the person that's in full control of everything, this may very well be exactly what you need. And I would highly recommend checking out some sound demos. I will upload one as well. And just to give you kind of a vibe, but still, even then, you need to kind of feel the controls to really get to grips with it. I think Abyss by Dawesome is a very interesting outing. And again, it's definitely not made for me, but I still think I will get some very interesting use out of it. So that's it for this video. Once again, thanks to Dawesome for sending me a license of Abyss to give it a whirl. If there are any questions, drop them down below. And yeah, that's it for this one. I'm going to say thank you for watching and see you in the next one.